Hey there, neighbor. Welcome to Wild Homestead Living. I'm Julie.
And I'm Kevin, and in this video we're going to go off the homestead to do something a little bit different.
So if you're up for an adventure that combines an interest in history and a love of wildness, stay with us.
A few years ago, Julie and I became interested in exploring ghost towns, mines, and other historic sites that are present in wilderness areas all over Washington state. Most of these sites are not well known, and many are situated in very hard to reach places miles from any established road or trail.
Because we found it so challenging to research and find these historic sites, we created a website called Exploring History in Your Hiking Boots in order to share historic information, trip reports, and maps to some of these locations with people who were also interested in them. The idea was that we would provide the resource we wish we had when we were just getting started with our explorations and hopefully help foster the preservation of these sites by giving more people a vested interest in them.
Unfortunately, we quickly discovered the error in our thinking. Not everyone looking to visit these sites was doing so out of an interest in preserving the history they represented, and an increased number of visitors in some cases led to drastic measures by the agencies responsible for managing the sites.
As disheartening as it was, we took the website down, and any future explorers will need to find their own trail of breadcrumbs if they wish to follow in our footsteps.
That being said, our own explorations continue, and a couple weeks ago we headed out into the Cascade Mountains near our home to seek out a historic mine we have visited many times before.
The road leading up the trailhead for this site is not well maintained, so we never know what to expect when we start driving it. A dip in the road and some large rocks that threatened to shear off our bumper caused us to stop short on this day.
With the vehicle parked and thankfully still in one piece, we donned our packs and headed up the road. Fortunately, we were only about a quarter-mile shy of our intended parking spot, so the hike went quickly, and before we knew it, we were entering the woods and keeping our eyes peeled for signs that we were on the right track.
Most of the mines we have visited are miles off the beaten path and hundreds, if not thousands of feet up mountains. They require a lot of physical effort to reach, and off-trail navigation skills are required to avoid getting lost. But evidence of the mining operations can often be seen at the foot of the mountain, especially if the mine used an aerial tram system to transport ore down.
The mine we were attempting to visit did have an aerial tram, and we made a quick stop at the lower tram site to inspect the remnants of the tram and rail system that are slowly being reclaimed by the landscape.
The most striking relic at the lower tram site is the enormous diesel engine that was used to power the tram. The structure that once housed the engine has long since collapsed, but the engine itself remains mostly intact, although far too rusty to ever work again. It's a surreal feeling to see this engine sitting without any context in a forest clearing, and it's hard to imagine what the area must have looked like when this large industrial enterprise was still in operation.
The lower tram site was situated right next to a stream, and we had to cross that stream in order to continue up the mountain.
Kevin seemed to think if he just ran across the stream fast enough, he would be able to keep his socks dry. He managed to make it across in just under 5 seconds.
Julie took a different approach. After psyching herself up for the crossing, she seemed to be determined to stay dry by walking on the rocks. But you can see the point where she realized that idea wouldn't work, and she just reserved herself to walking carefully across in the water. Although both of us ended up with somewhat damp socks, we were both smiling when we turned to head uphill from the stream.
And it was all uphill from there. We first climbed the bank away from the stream, and then we continued into the forest. As we climbed, we started finding more and more evidence of the tram system that had once been in place. Oh wow, look at all these tram parts. What did you find?
Stuff. Continuing uphill, we found the remnants of an old bridge.
Old bridge.
Then, Julie spotted something truly exciting.
I found the main puncheon. You can see the wood slats.
Fortunately for you, she immediately went into interpreter mode, so I'll let her explain what we found.
This
is what I was looking for. Are you filming me right now?
What are we standing on?
This is what we were looking for. This is the puncheon road, also called the Corduroy road. And it's called that because what they did is they would cut these slats of wood and then they would cover the dirt and the ground with them, and it would be their road. And what's amazing is that this one we know was put in probably close to 100 years ago. And even though it was put in when there was a big mine and a mill and there was no trees, like all of that has changed. The world has radically changed, but this has lasted. It's pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about it.
Having just been schooled on what I was seeing, we continued up the mountain following the 100-year-old puncheon road.
We eventually emerged from the forest to find the upper reaches of the mountains still blanketed in snow. We knew at this point that it was not going to be possible to reach the mine safely, but we decided to push on as far as we felt safe to do.
This part of the climb was slow going as it was extremely steep. This video does not do the angle of the slope justice. It was basically like climbing a staircase with extremely loose and uneven steps. By our usual standards, this would not be a hard climb, but I think we were both feeling the cumulative effects of a year spent mostly at home trying to avoid a pandemic.
We stuck to the melted areas as much as we could, but eventually headed out onto the snowfield. As we climbed higher, the view just kept getting better. We decided to stop for lunch on a small island of trees in the middle of a snowfield, as streams under the snow made further climbing more dangerous than we cared to attempt.
After lunch, we took a little time to take in the sights of the surrounding peaks. Although we didn't reach our original goal, the solitude and views that we experienced at this altitude were well worth the time and effort it took to get here. We both feel very fortunate to live in close proximity to wild places such as this, and visiting them helps us forget all of our troubles, at least for a while.
After enjoying the view, it was time to head back down the mountain, so once again we set off across the snow. We took our time on the way back, stopping to admire this interesting tree trunk, and then this trunk that further documented past human activity in the area. We also found the remains of an old penstock, which is a pipe that diverts water for power generation. I found part of the wood that used to form this pipe, which leads to a Pelton wheel.
You can see the fitting right there.
Wild.
Where the wood would have fit together. It's amazing.
I got distracted and spent a little too much time trying to film a bit of skunk cabbage emerging near a stream. This gave Julie time to take a quick nap on what appeared to be a very unlikely bed.
Are you ready?
With the nap out of the way, we continued back down the old Corduroy road. We also crossed a very unstable looking log bridge. It was amazing to see how much this bridge had deteriorated in the 6 or so years that had passed since our first visit to this area.
Continuing downhill, we arrived at the part of the hike where it suddenly feels like someone added a couple of extra miles to the return trip. It seems like you've been traveling downhill longer than you were traveling uphill, and like you should have arrived at the car at least an hour ago. So we were relieved when we finally heard the roar of the stream and saw the familiar waterfall marking our crossing spot.
The bridge was still out, so Julie and I had to reenact our earlier crossing. Julie went first this time, making her way across in the same careful, deliberate fashion she had earlier. I again made a dash for it, although the miles had taken their toll, and this time it took me a full 8 seconds to complete the crossing.
After crossing the stream, we paused for a moment to reflect on the ghost of industry past, standing alone and silent amongst the trees. Exhausted and very happy, we then returned to our car and headed home.
We hope you enjoyed joining us on this field trip, and if you did, stay tuned, because we will be documenting some of our other outdoor adventures in the not-too-distant future.
We would love to know what comments and questions you have for us. Go ahead and scroll down and leave them below, and we also invite you to come hang out with us over at our website, which is wildhomesteadliving.com.
Thank you so much for joining us.
We'll see you next time.